Like that, then you're like out.
Okay. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. Welcome to everybody. And I just note at the beginning here, we will not have a meeting this month of the Tompkins County Development Corporation. We don't need one. So we will proceed to business. I know we're all here. I was delaying for a few minutes to see if our last member could make it here. I think he's on the way. So, but we'll proceed with privilege of the floor. And I have two blue cards. Oh, there he is. Great. Perfect timing. Teresa Ault.
Okay, is this on? Okay. In the 26 hours since yesterday's hearing, I suspect that not all IDA board members have had a chance to study the hearing record, so I will shamelessly repeat what I said yesterday. The Citizen on the site of the former Joe's restaurant is not the kind of housing that the city of Ithaca needs. From Heather McDaniel's memo about financial need of the project, I teased out what the rents are likely to be. A very small one-bedroom apartment of about 600 square feet would probably rent for about $1,758 a month. It would take an annual income of $70,000 plus to afford that. What kinds of jobs are there in the city of Ithaca? Well, a beginning secretary, administrative assistant 2 at Cornell might make $20 an hour, or about $40,000 a year. I looked at the city of Ithaca's CSEA administrative unit pay scales. Only a few of the most skilled, top paid positions in the unit could afford one of those one-bedroom apartments. So the Citizen is market rate housing, the kind we don't need more and more of. That $5,500 fee per unaffordable unit to the Tompkins County Community Housing Development Fund won't be paid for several years. So it will be quite a few years before the fund can be used to attract state or federal money to build affordable units. And those units can actually be built, if any land is left. I noticed in the community benefits overview that over the next 10 years, the amount of abated taxes will somewhat exceed the amount of actually paid new taxes. 10 years. We don't need more gentrification in the West End. What we need is housing that the people who work in the city can afford. I'm talking about all those clerical workers and retail clerks and wait persons and hotel cleaners. When people are forced to live far away and drive to work, that's very bad for the planet. By the way, the West State Street project of VISM is just what we need. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Peter Wisiger.
My name is Peter Wisiger. I live at 705 North Tioga Street in Ithaca. I'd like to address a few points. First, at yesterday's TCIDA Finance and Audit meeting, there was an illuminating discussion of why the organizations should stop using the term tax abatement and instead use the phrase tax incentive. Why? These people, to use someone's phrase, who see the term tax abatement see it as a negative, whereas the idea of the organization incentivizing development would be greeted more positively. Setting aside for a moment the somewhat demeaning tone of these people or those people, or the idea that something can be sensationalized and still not hold a grain of truth, and understanding that recent press has, sorry to say, been somewhat negative toward what you do, I don't see why the organization can't use whichever term is appropriate given the context. As far as I can see, you're using tax abatements to incentivize development. By way of example, allow me to use the two terms in my comments on the projects on today's agenda. First, I know you're not used to me saying something positive, but on the face of it, the affordable housing project, the Stately, looks terrific. It has a firm plan for how it will be managed and will be associated with a nonprofit with the capacity to manage it. It's just the type of project I think you should incentivize with an abatement, and I urge you to do so. Now for the Citizen. You'll find my comments from yesterday's public hearing on the Citizen in your package. I won't repeat them here. The short version is I urge you not to provide the developers a tax abatement because the project is not the type you should incentivize using public tax dollars. I would add that giving a market rate housing project a tax abatement only incentivizes the developers and others like it to come to TCIDA to ask for one as well. If you want to incentivize its positive environmental impact, then I urge you to give it a shorter abatement, say 5 years instead of 10. Finally, another point that came up yesterday, along with the question of the use of the term incentives instead of abatements, was whether the agency could point to the assessed value of a property the agency supported and contrast it with the value of the property would have had if you hadn't given the project on the property a tax abatement. And that's about 20 minutes into the recording for those who weren't there. The idea was thrown around as to whether it'd be worth keeping track of how the sum total of what the project's tax contribution or the net change in assessment would be with and without the assessment, and how that figure would make for a quote, compelling picture and be useful in proving that what you're doing offers a benefit to the community. Again, a quote. This sounds like a lovely PR idea, but I'd urge the board to remember that you actually don't know what these figures are. If you have a good piece of land, another developer might come along, or the original developer might go ahead with the project even without the abatement or the incentive payment. You just can't assume that the project is dead if they don't get an abatement. Using the Marriott as a way to justify giving many developers, or nearly every developer who comes to you an abatement is not a sensible way to proceed. What if the Marriott was actually the exception rather than the rule? There are times when the land will be built on without a subsidy if you'd only let it happen. Remember, as I'm sure you know, that agencies can constantly engage in the game of chicken, where developers are always going to say they need your assistance, and it's your job to recognize when they can afford to do the project without your help, or when another developer will come along who can. Yes, I recognize they submit viable pro forma and that Heather does a great job of evaluating it, but I also know from my academic work that historically many developers game the system, as you probably would not be surprised to learn. In other words, you can't project that a property will be vacant over the next 5 years and pretend that the assessment will remain the same, because you don't know. I urge you not to begin to speculate in the proposed way just to try and make yourselves look good. It would be irresponsible to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anybody else who wishes to address the Industrial Development Agency? Okay, seeing none, I proceed. Are there any additions to the agenda for today? Heather?
I just wanted to note that Rob Henry, who usually does all the audio, video, and the live streaming, is on vacation. So bear with us. If everyone could really speak into the microphone. I hear there's some feedback issues. And right now I'm hearing that it may not be live streaming on our YouTube channel. If Dominic and I are unable to figure that out, we will post it, the recording, as soon as the meeting is over and we're able to get it up there. So I just wanted to make you aware, sometimes things happen and we're doing the best we can.
Yes, so the meeting is being recorded.
It is,
So if the live stream is not working, it'll get posted. Somebody can watch.
yes.
All right. Anything else? I'd like to proceed to item number 4 on our agenda, business. And the first item is 602 West Buffalo Street, The Citizen, for consideration of final approval. And I'd note that, pardon me, we had a public hearing yesterday and all of the members should have in front of them the notes from that public hearing.
I just need to abstain from this, just to make a note.
Okay, we'll give Jeff a moment to step away. And we have a representative from the citizen who wishes to address us. Julia or Catherine or Todd? Do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, at this point. Todd, would you like to say something?
Okay. All right. Well, could we put the resolution on the floor? Anybody wish to move it? John moves it. Could I get a second? Duxon seconds. All right. Comments, questions, discussion? Heather?
I'll just point out that you do have the return on investment memo in your package, as well as the authorizing resolution. And I did distribute the public hearing minutes. We emailed them yesterday, but I did leave you copies as well.
Well, if everybody is happy, I guess I would just make a couple comments. Certainly, this is a for-profit development. We have looked at several, and I believe our rationale for doing that is that we want new, safe, energy-efficient housing in our community for all elements of our income stream, or however you describe it. One of the comments that was made regarding this project was that there's a rough equivalence over 10 years between the abatement amount and the taxes actually paid. I think that's really coincidental, and I'd point out to my colleagues that this building will survive for many years, presumably past 10. And so I'm not sure it's fair to just look at the 10-year period and say those are the only taxes that will be paid. In fact, you want to look at the useful life of the building, which I would assume is closer to 50 or more. And as you get past that 10-year, year on year, you see significant new taxes above any abatement. So this is a net positive for the municipalities that share in the tax revenue. I think we're taking a piece of property that, while I miss the Joe's Restaurant, it is a landmark, and it's a shame to see it move on to another use. But at the same time, this went through site plan review with the city, and they considered that issue. There is a greater need at this point, I think, than an empty restaurant building for new housing. And so I will support this. I would note Mike Sigler came to our meeting yesterday, and his comments were he just would like the building to have perhaps a more interesting look to it. So, but I think we're past that, and that's not our remit to look at that. But he asked that I bring that up with everybody. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to this? John?
Yeah, briefly to more or less echo your comments, the total taxes paid by this project during the abatement period are more than 10 times the taxes that would be paid in the case of the, if the existing building were to remain. And I think that that's, I mean, you know, I understand where Peter is coming from. I think he does make some good points that, you know, I've often echoed that question of whether or not something will get done anyway. I think this project is taking a pretty profound amount of risk. It's an untested area. They're trying to do market rate housing in an area where there really isn't a lot of that. It's between two highways. It's in a flood zone. You know, I hope their construction costs are in fact reasonable, but there's some substantial risk to that during the construction period as well. And I think that the reason we do this is because we understand that these private developers are taking that risk, and the benefits to the community of doing the project are significant, and it's in our CTAP density zone, which is where we want to see the density. So I think all the way around it's good, and I plan to support the project.
Okay. Heather.
I just wanted to clarify on the incentive amounts, the way that we've structured our incentive policy at the IDA, it's been this way for quite some time, is our standard incentive is a 7-year incentive that starts at 93%, declines in equal increments over that 7-year period. With most projects in that 7-year incentive, the new taxes paid and the taxes abated are roughly equal over that 7-year period. When we instituted the financial need incentive, which provides a 10-year incentive that does start at 90% or 100% in year one and declines in equal increments, the IDA board at the time did recognize that the amount paid versus the amount abated tends to shift a little bit, and the amount paid is a little bit less than, or a little bit less than the amount that is abated. So you'll see that on every scenario that comes through using our standard abatement scenarios.
Thank you, Heather. Deborah.
Yes, I had some observations, I think, more than anything else. I actually did go over the minutes of the public hearing, and I'm sorry that I missed it. I will try to do better in the future. I thought Mr. Wissaker raised a number of points that are worth considering as we go forward. The fact that once a project is completed, all jobs associated with it should pay a living wage. I don't know how that works when we are providing incentives under a contractual relationship with someone who's going to be hiring another company, but that might be something we look at in the future. Requiring that a developer use a contract who pays prevailing wage, as well as contractors who have an apprenticeship program. Again, I don't know how much influence we can have in those relationships between our company that we're contracting with and a third-party contractor, but I think it's worth considering as we go forward. And then I wanted to be sure that I correctly understood that if a project we incentivize is sold, that the tax incentives don't automatically transfer to an acquirer with the property, right? That's correct, right?
Yeah.
That is correct. The pilot agreement would terminate upon change in ownership unless the applicant were to request that the IDA specifically transfer it to a proposed new owner.
And then we
We'd have to vote.
make that
Yes.
decision.
Yep.
Okay, and then finally, I like the suggestion that I don't know how we can ensure that the contractor purchases all its supplies locally, but I think we ought to somehow or another encourage that in some of these projects. I also don't know how realistic it is when you need supplies for a project of any substantial size. But I think these are all worthwhile observations, and I want to thank Mr. Wissaker for providing them. Thank you.
Todd?
Yeah, I'd like to agree with everything Deborah said there. I get the same concerns, and great observation by Mr. Wissaker too. There's a big problem for me too, is thinking about if someone sells the project, what happens? Russ, we can we could definitely add language in, right?
Yeah, we do as a matter of course that if the property is transferred or the project's transferred, if the benefits are to continue, that requires board approval. So that's part of the contractual agreements.
If they continue, okay, so they
Right.
can't just walk away from the obligations they
No,
made then.
if they walk away or don't undertake the project, that they're in default, we terminate and put them back on the tax rolls.
Okay, and I know I asked before, could we add language in there to protect I guess let's say the subcontractors that are on the projects that hire people locally? I'm not saying because the whole purpose of it is the intention is they're supposed to be hiring people that live in our local jurisdiction that we have in our agreement. Is there a way we could add language in there that the subs have to, before they get any of these tax incentives or abatements, that there's like a checklist to prove that, okay, all the subs are taken care of? We could release this like during the phases of the project. I know you do it with the bank.
That's a matter of policy versus statutory law. The subs are presumably protected by the lien law of New York State. So that's more of a policy versus a statutory requirement.
I'm just saying that because I know some contractors, not associated with Todd's, but with other projects that they've been a year and a half without getting anything, and it just costs them a lot of money. They're the ones that are employing local people.
Well, I can tell you that if there is a lien placed upon an IDA induced project, that triggers an event of default.
And we'd be able to claw back the abatement, which is all we'd really be able to do anyway, right?
Okay,
Right.
Right.
okay.
If somebody were to be in arrears and the contractor places a lien, then we could.
So there's no way as a policy we could add language in there to,
Well, I think they're saying it is in there.
but it's after the fact, it's still the contractor employing local people still paying the bills, still buying material. Still trying to keep business going with other projects, and then
I guess I'll jump in with a comment. I'd be reluctant to do that, Todd. One, as Russ said, there's a whole book, the lien law, section of New York State law that addresses this, and it is a matter between the contractor and the subcontractor and the owner. And putting ourselves into that, I don't think we're well placed to do that. We don't have.
I don't think we have the right. I don't think we would have standing because that's a third party relationship that's governed by the law, and our ability to address their failure to comply with that, if we put it into an agreement, isn't going to be any greater than our ability to terminate the incentive agreement and claw back the funds. I don't know that it adds anything to do what you're suggesting, just lawyerly talk.
well,
And I guess my further point is, I don't know that we'd be very good at it in that we don't have an investigative capacity, or we're not a court. And you really need to figure out in every instance, is this a problem caused by the sub, or is it the contractor or the owner not paying, unfairly? And it can be either, but you really need to make that determination. I don't see how we would do that. John, did you have something?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a procedural problem with, basically we have to tell the assessment department how to assess the property in advance, which we do, through the pilot. So you can't really say, well, you can't actually get the benefit until the contractor is paid, because the timing of these two things aren't necessarily related to each other. It's like the abatement starts when it does, and the project could still be under construction. In some cases, like that happens. So it's like the process that we have is to say, if there is a problem, we can take it back. It's, we could terminate it if we become aware that there's a problem before a particular tax year has occurred. But it's not really like we're giving them something that we can hold on to before we say, okay, you've checked the box, right?
I guess I'm kind of worried too about if people say they can't find contractors with local workforce. Because it could be most of the time there's a lot of history to it, because people aren't paid on time and they can't afford to do work for people, certain developers, because their money's out there, hanging out there all that time, and they can't invest in other projects. They got bonds out there. They got all kinds of stuff that's wrapped up with the project, and when they don't get paid on time. So that's, I guess, what I'm looking at. That's probably why we're not seeing, and I'm not just saying tax project, other projects where some of these developers claim that they can't get local bidders. It's or people with local manpower is because they haven't been paid timely and they've been stung too many times.
Okay. Ann,
So was mentioned that if there's, say, a contractor or subcontractor files a lien against a developer, then, or against the project the owner, I guess it would be, then does that stop the pilot from continuing?
That would trigger an event of default, which would require them to provide notice to them if they don't cure it. And provide us with the information that they actually have cured it, we default them and put the property back on the tax rolls. So if there's a lien filed against an IDA-induced project, be it a mortgage lien or mechanics lien or whatever it might be, it triggers an event of default, and there's a notice period and some things that will have to happen, but it's not an automatic, property goes back on the tax rolls. It'd be the same thing even if it was off on the tax rolls. There's a process under the lien law.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
anybody else? Any further, Ducks.
I'm still, so I haven't seen many of these. I'm curious, and it's possible I missed it because it's a lot of legalese, but is the payment in lieu of the affordable housing, of building affordable housing memorialized in the resolution? And I believe the developer is choosing 20%, I'm sorry, the deferred 20%, correct?
It's in the application and the resolution memorializes the application. So the IDA did approve adding that question to the application. So it is there. They've requested to pay the additional 20% convenience fee, which I believe was about $88,000, so that they can pay the remainder. They'll pay that up front, and then the remainder they'll split over 3 years during the first 3 years of operation. So that's what our policy says. If you want to pay those 3 years of operation rather than paying at closing up front, then you pay that 20% convenience fee.
And the 20% convenience fee is paid at closing, right?
Yes.
So we'll get that. And that's on your last month's agenda. When we had the analysis of the cost benefit analysis for the project, it's reflected there as well.
Right, thank you. Fair enough. And I share many of the sentiments already expressed here. I'll add too, though, that this, on one level, it doesn't seem like a lot of money. I will say that the housing fund that Anna and I serve on has been very successful at leveraging seemingly small amounts. We've only had $400,000 a year to play with over the past several years. But it has been very successful in expressing local community support to much larger funders that are then able to help nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers make a lot of below market housing. And I'll be the first to say it's kind of an imperfect neoliberal approach to building affordable housing. What is the system we have? And the $500,000 total that will go into the fund is not insubstantial.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? All right, are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll as on the resolution. Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes.
Jeff Gorski abstains. John Guttridge.
Yes.
Todd Brewer.
Yes.
Duxon Nguyen.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, so that passes. All right, we will welcome Jeff. And then our next order of business is 510 West State Street, this Stately, and this is the application. I believe we have some representatives on the screen, and Todd Fox is with us. And I invite him to come forward. Heather, did you want to do any introduction here?
Sure. So what you do have in your packet on page 13 is the application for incentives. This is a 100% affordable housing project. They are receiving low-income housing tax credits. Our uniform tax exemption policy at the IDA does provide for an incentive for affordable housing projects that is 12% of net operating income. So what you will see in your application with the application is a projection of the incentive amount that will be provided for a recommended 30 years based on that net operating income in year one, and then a 2% increase each year. That's what our policy says. So those numbers are in there. The numbers may change slightly based on their final financial review with their tax credit application, but they should not change very significantly. The applicant, I've also put together a community benefit memo, which you'll find on page 35. The applicant has also requested that you consider a 0.5% fee rather than a full 1% fee, and has provided a justification for that. I did email it today after I received it. I also left copies at your table for you. And also I left for you at your place at the table was a replacement to page 8 of their application. The very top, it has the calculation of the percentage of project cost finance from the public sector. It should be 31% rather than the higher number that was there. They had included all of their tax credits, which didn't seem to make sense. So they asked me to replace this page. In any case, that percentage number, the reason that we asked for it on the IDA application, the percentage of project cost finance from the public sector, is so that we can be aware of whether a project would need to comply with the state's prevailing wage requirements. That is a new requirement that the state has promulgated. The regs have not been clarified yet. It hasn't technically been put into place yet, but all of the IDAs in the state are calculating this number, providing this number to an applicant. If their public sources is more than 30% from all public sources, most projects would be required to comply with this prevailing wage requirement. However, there are certain categories of projects that are exempt. An affordable housing project is one of those. So the number, regardless of what it is, doesn't mean very much in this case, because the applicant would be exempt from that prevailing wage requirement. So you have that there. I am happy to answer questions about the IDA incentive or anything like that. I'd love to hand it over to Todd and his team. He's got Julia Boucher and Catherine Cullen on Zoom.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Todd Fox, I'm the CEO and founder of Vism Development. And I'm going to hand it off to Julia, as always.
So hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. And today, actually, I'm handing it over to Catherine. She'll be making the presentation on behalf of Vism, and I'm here as support.
Hi, everyone. I will be making the presentation, so I'll go ahead and put that on the screen. I'll just need participant screen sharing permissions.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, can everyone see that okay? Great. So again, my name is Catherine. I'm a Senior Development Associate with Vism Development, and I'm here with Julia Booker and Chris Durr, who is a consultant on the project and here to assist answer questions on the Stately Apartments. We are all here today on behalf of Vism Development Group, who is the applicant for this meeting. So Stately is a mixed-use, mixed-income development located at 510 West State Street in the West State corridor of Ithaca. As Heather mentioned, the project is supported by New York Homes and Community Renewal, or HCR. Vism Development Group, as you know, is a local developer rooted in Ithaca with a track record of student housing, market rate, and affordable housing projects. We have and always will continue to work towards our mission of providing high quality housing that people feel proud to live in. Our current development pipeline totals 800,000 square feet across 11 projects. The Stately project is located in the heart of Ithaca's West State Corridor between downtown and the West End District, as shown here. The project is located within 0.3 miles of 3 bus stops, which are served by over 20 bus routes. Stately is also walkable to several urban parks, recreational trails, and downtown amenities. The building itself is situated between West Seneca and West State Streets, with front-facing access on both of these as well as on Corn Street. The project includes commercial space, which opens onto West State Street. Residents are able to access the building from all streets with a main lobby and entrance on Corn Street. The West Seneca entrance will have a year-round garden, and the Corn Street entrance will include a children's play area with seating and a landscape garden. The ground floor includes the master leased commercial space and tenant amenities. These amenities include a community room, lobby, bike room, shared laundry room, as well as our supportive services and property management offices. Both final site plan approval and seeker negative determination have been received from the city. The building permit is expected to be issued in late September prior to construction closing as per the HCR timeline. The Stately's unique parcel shape creates 3 front facades on West State, West Seneca, and Corn Streets. West State will host a separate entrance and storefront for the commercial space. West Seneca and Corn Street will both be resident entrances, although tenants will also be able to access the building from West State via sidewalk adjacent to the building. On-street parking is available both immediately by the building and in nearby residential areas a short walk from the site. There are also several parking garages within a quarter mile of the Stately. As previously mentioned, Stately is an HCR funded project that will serve supportive service residents and low-income households earning 30 to 60% AMI. The project will create new property management, supportive services, and other local jobs to be determined by the commercial space tenant. Vism is partnering with Arbor Housing and Development based in Corning as a part owner and property manager of the project. Catholic Charities of Tompkins and Tioga based in Ithaca will be our supportive services provider. We are excited to be working with a local and experienced team on this project. The development team is also committed to pursuing green building standards. This slide outlines the green building benchmarks that the Stately will meet, as well as the building systems integrated in the design to increase energy efficiency and building resiliency. The Stately is supported also by Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, or ESHI for short, to provide supportive services to 20 of the total 57 units. These will be reserved for homeless survivors of domestic violence and homeless individuals with a history of substance use disorder, or SUD. Supportive services for these residents, again, will be provided by Catholic Charities with offices on site. Another 6 units will be fully accessible for individuals with mobility impairment, and 3 units fully adapted for hearing and visually impaired individuals. All 57 units will be accessible for visitors. Our contractor estimates a total of 125 construction jobs will be generated by the project, as well as 3 permanent full-time jobs that will be generated by Arbor for property management. Catholic Charities and the commercial tenant will generate an undetermined number of jobs on site. The total value of the proposed pilot, as shown in the application, is $2,012,550 over the course of 30 years. The Stately will qualify for sales and mortgage tax incentives through a Housing Development Fund Corporation, or an HDFC, and will not need these incentives from the TCIDA. As an HCR affordable housing project, 31% of project costs will be financed by the public sector through HCR and Tompkins County. Unit rents are summarized on the slide and will be available to households earning 30 to 60% AMI. Our request to the TCIDA is a 30-year pilot as described in our application. We are also requesting, as Heather mentioned, a 0.5% TCIDA administrative fee based on the high level of participation by Arbor Housing and Development, which is a nonprofit. This concludes our presentation. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Okay. Open it up for questions, comments. Jeff.
So, thanks. So Todd, talk to us about, obviously with your request for the 0.5% as well. So help me understand your relationship or ownership percentage versus Arbor and just help us understand all of that and how much will they own, how much will you own? Because I just want to understand, you know, the 0.5% request as well.
I don't know, Julia or Chris, if you guys want to kind of talk about the different ownership structures and like what happens after the 15-year period, that would definitely be helpful.
Sure. Hi guys, this is Chris Durr. I'm happy to jump in and to supplement. Catherine's doing a great job. I was engaged by Vism and Todd to help them deliver affordable housing to the Ithaca market. So we structured the transaction to make it most appealing to HCR. And one of those components to do that was to engage and partner with a not-for-profit. And so Todd and Vism agreed to partner with Arbor Housing and Development. And the structure is such that Arbor will have a controlling interest in the managing member of the limited liability company that will actually own the development. The other members of the limited liability company will be the tax credit equity investors. And so Arbor, or Steuben Church People Against Poverty, will be the managing member of that LLC. And then at the end of and the LLC is in place and limited partners are in the deal for 15 years. At the end of 15 years, they've received the benefits that they expected. They'll exit the transaction. And then there'll be a choice to make. Arbor can stay in the deal, or Arbor can elect to exit the deal, at which point, to the extent that Arbor elected to exit the deal, then Vism would step in and take over ownership of the deal. So for the first 15 years, just so that I'm clear, for the first 15 years, Arbor will be the managing member and the manager of the development, after which time there'll be an inflection point where the limited liability equity partners exit, and Arbor will have the election of maintaining its managing membership role through the exercise of a right of first refusal, or a ROFR, or not exercising it, in which case Vism would step in and would maintain the management of the partnership. That ownership structure, however, does not change the requirement that the development be managed as an affordable development long term. I forget whether it's 30 years or 50 years, but it's a long-term agreement to manage the development as affordable housing.
Did that answer your question, Jeff?
Yep.
And I did put up the ownership structure up there which they did submit to me. I probably should have put it in your application packet, but they submitted it as a draft and then never submitted the final. So my apologies if it was not included in there.
I would appreciate it if you'd send it.
I usually do
Go to
with the affordable housing organizations. It's terribly complicated how they affect the tax credits. So they have lots of different entities. So I will do that. And I will email this to you after the meeting as well and make sure it's posted on our website.
We probably
And
want to,
Heather, it is complicated.
Copy without
And one of the reasons,
IN on there, yeah.
well, with the
sorry,
member being. Hold on one second. Okay.
what I was just going to add was that it is complicated. And one of the reasons that it's a draft is because until the equity investor is chosen and those agreements are negotiated, it's subject to some small tweaks. So that's why it's a draft. It'll remain a draft until we get closer to closing.
Deborah.
So the equity investor, whoever it turns out to be, is just a passive investor with no actual control over the operation of the property.
That is correct. They're investing solely for the tax credits that will generate it. So what happens in tax credit deals is, just to use as an example, these are not firm numbers, but they will invest 90 cents into the transaction today in exchange for getting $1 worth of tax losses over the next 10 years. So they'll get 10 cents every year regularly for 10 years. So if they have that dollar, they need to, that's 10 years of tax losses that they get. They need to stay in the transaction for 15 years, however. But they're entirely passive. They're only investing in it for those tax credits or those losses that are used to offset other gains in other businesses.
And that's what that number means under equity that says 19 million something is tax credit equity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And their risk is that, they're contributing that $19 million today, even though they're getting the losses over 10 years.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just Heather had talked to us regarding past projects that we've agreed to do the 0.5%. So I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit more. Obviously, I've read your email and that information, but I'm just hoping you could share a little bit more on that.
Sure. The IDA did not have any sort of fee. Our only fee policy was 1% of hard project costs for several decades. When the IDA started to do affordable housing projects, the first one that came was a not-for-profit developer, INHS, and they requested a 0.5% fee. There was significant discussion on my end back and forth with the Office of Housing and Community Renewal. They have to approve the budgets. And so the IDA did approve that 0.5% fee. So cutting the fee 50%. And then Art House came next, affordable housing project down on Cherry Street. They are a for-profit developer, same sort of structure with the tax credit. However, for-profit developer, the IDA declined to approve that 0.5% fee. For Cuga Park on the affordable housing project, for-profit developer, the IDA did approve a 0.5% fee. And then we had Asteri Ithaca, which had the public parking garage, a conference center, and an affordable housing project. The IDA did approve a 0.5% fee. When the IDA revised all of its policies and added a more concrete fee structure, a different fee structure for solar projects, for housing, affordable housing, it specifically says in the policy that they will do a 0.5% fee for not-for-profit housing developers. It is silent on the for-profit developers. I have gone through their 20-year project pro forma on this project that has been submitted to the Housing Finance Corporation. And I'm pretty familiar with how the waterfall of revenues gets spread out on affordable housing projects. I sit on all the tax credit projects for INHS's projects. There's probably 14 or 15 of them now. So I've seen a lot of them with those complicated structures. All of those tax credit investors get paid first. The developer fee is always a deferred fee. And in most affordable housing projects, whether it's a for-profit or a not-for-profit developer, the deferred developer fee gets paid last if there's any revenue left. So if if their rents are not what they think they're going to be, the rents are projected based on 50% of AMI. If you have a lot of residents that are at 30% of AMI, their rent will be less, there will be less revenue generated. Those deferred developer fees a lot of times don't ever get paid, and they have to get paid by year 15 when, you know, that structure that Chris talked about sort of moves around a little bit. What I've seen in this project is that it's very likely, I mean, the revenue generated is so thin that it's very likely the deferred developer fee will not get paid. The other thing that I sort of looked at in talking to the applicant is they're not getting a sales tax incentive. There's no partial mortgage recording tax incentive. It's strictly the pilot really to make this project affordable, because even at the as of right real property tax payment for affordable housing projects, the numbers don't work. HDFC would not accept it. So what I looked at there is the savings, and you see that on page 30 in the application with the of your packet on page 30 is the savings in terms of their pilot payments as compared to if, you know, they were just paying as of right under 581A, which is the real property tax law for affordable housing property taxes. Their savings is only like $63,000, $65,000, $68,000 a year. Their fee is $205,000 up front. So they're basically paying up front, and they're not even going to get any benefit really until year 4, because, you know, the savings is so small. So I would recommend the IDA consider cutting that fee in half. For an affordable housing project. I think it makes sense given their very low revenue. There's no margins.
Okay. John. Yeah, can you clarify that? So there is no mortgage recording tax or sales tax incentive, and that means that the materials will be fully taxable. Sales tax will be collected, or
through one of the entities, which is a not-for-profit in the ownership structure. They will likely be able to not pay sales tax on the construction materials.
Well, we're not granting
We're
them
not
incentive.
granting that.
They're
So
still receiving these benefits, right? I mean,
They're
it's-
receiving the benefit, but they're not receiving the benefit from us. So, you know, the fee structure sort of takes into account that we're providing a sales tax incentive, and we're not here.
Okay, Ann?
That answers one of my questions, so thanks for asking that, John. So I'm not seeing parking on here, is that correct? There's not going to be parking on site?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I'm supportive of the 0.5% fee. That makes sense to me, and so thanks for, you know, some information we had going back and forth, you know, prior to this meeting, you know, supporting that we've done that before for other projects such as this. I like all the amenities you're providing with the indoor parking, for bike parking, the community room. Is the exterior resident patio, is that a common area?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's great. So neighbors can have more of an opportunity to get to know each other. And the tot lot, I guess it's a little kids play area. Is that what that is?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Gardens and supportive service areas. What does that look like? Is that like offices where people can use from, that are providing services there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think that's it. That's all the question I have. Thank you.
Todd?
you know, I'm just curious, with all these owners involved with this to have something in a piece of it, well, who's finally responsible for making sure that the condition of the pilots are met?
Managing partner.
The managing partner.
Right, that's exactly right.
The managing
We'll have to work through it, their corporate structure and figure out who is the tenant and would be paying the pilots, which of course we will do.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and just for everybody's edification, the manager, the real property manager is going to be Arbor or an affiliate of Arbor, who is an affiliate of Arbor will be the managing member of the entity. So really it's going to be Arbor who's going to make sure that all the operating expenses are fulfilled, including the pilot payment.
okay, it just seems like a lot of these, with all these different owners and everything there, everything's being carved up, so it's dropping that percentage below the 30%. You know, I don't know, it just seems kind of a backhanded way of avoiding the prevailing wage language that was put out there. When I made references to that, our house project, I'm a neighbor of that project, and I know Todd can tell you too, probably he's seen it too. You can ask the people at the carpet place over there. It's not good. It's I hope any projects that happen in the future with affordable housing, I hope things are done differently and it's managed better, because to me, that's a disaster over there. As a neighbor of that place, it's a disaster. I felt safer walking through the jungle than I did walking past that building at night.
If I may very quickly, the affordable housing industry is very unique and complex. There's tax credits, which is how they gather equity. So there's a lot of moving parts. So I understand your concern, but this is not out of the norm.
And I'll just add that affordable housing projects are exempt from the state's
I understand
prevailing
that.
wage.
I know that very well. Yep.
John?
Yeah, I want to react a little bit to I think that the situation with Art House is unique and complex, and I want to make sure we're not casting affordable housing projects universally with that light. You know, there are reasons it is the way that it is. And, you know, I think it's important for us to continue to support affordable housing projects in the community as much as we can.
Get more? I get one other question. I see on page 18, it has the total sources of funds for the project costs were over 29 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have a question about that?
No, I thought I saw a different number there before too. Okay.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Right. Anybody else? Jackson?
So along the lines of Todd's comment, so at Art House, when I talked to the property managers, they had expressed that the tenants that had support were their least problematic tenants. In fact, they had no problems at all. And a big part of like John was saying, it's complicated, and a huge part of it is you throw someone in who's been homeless, give them a Section 8 voucher, which is great, but no support on how to live. There can be issues integrating. So anyway, this is a long way of me asking, does Catholic Charities provide this kind of supportive housing? Do they do this kind of work in other contexts, or will this be their first situation in which they're providing these services?
No, so this is Chris Durr, and the reason that the project teamed with Catholic Charities is because they have an established track record of providing support services to ESHI units. So this is not their first venture with ESHI units, which I think is important.
Great, thank you.
Deborah?
Can I just ask a question just for personal curiosity? You mentioned a loan from Tompkins County for $100,000. Is that something for the Community Housing Development Fund? What is that? I didn't know.
I was wondering about that. I was gonna say.
I was wondering too.
Does anybody have the
Uh,
answer?
I can answer that. The way that the Community Housing Development Fund funding is structured, it's a forgivable loan. For tax credit purposes. So while the Community Housing Development Fund talks about granting monies, I know Annie, you sit on it and so do I, and so does Duxon. The way that it's structured is as a forgivable loan.
Thank you, Heather.
So we're looking at a 0.5% reduction plus $100,000.
Well, we're going to vote on that. Yeah.
Next meeting.
Well, I don't know if we're going to send it to public. I'm going to ask that in a minute, but Jeff, you had something?
That was my question. Do we need to vote on 0.5% then to send it to public meeting?
Russ?
No, this is just accepting the application and authorizing council and your team to schedule the public hearing, come back to the board, and then you can approve the abatement if you so choose. But this is literally just accepting the application.
I had a couple comments, but John, go ahead.
I'd personally like to see the 0.5% show up in our agenda before we actually make a decision on it. And I think that I probably will support it, but just procedurally, it'd be nice to, give the public an opportunity to comment, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's good to telegraph what we're thinking prior to the public hearing if we can. I personally, I'm leaning towards supporting the 0.5% fee. And I'd also just like to speak to some of the merits of this proposal. I really like this development idea of what's proposed. And since there was mention of the art house, the Tompkins County IDA did support the art house and help make that happen. If I had to do that vote over again, I would still vote in favor of it. It is a good thing for our community to have it. I think we can learn some important lessons from the art house, just how hard it is to do affordable housing, not just the financing, but the actual operation. And art house, when it first opened, took some of the people who are hardest to house in our community. And I think they were probably more ambitious than they should have been in going about that without substantial supportive services being built in. And that's a lesson learned, I think we take forward, and this project seems to have absorbed that lesson. That here, I think the numbers are, there's 15 units for people, I've lost the page, but who have had histories of substance use disorder. Yeah, here it is. And 5 units will be reserved for homeless survivors of domestic violence. These are people that will need a lot of support to be successful. And this is our best chance to do that, I think. And we need more of this in our community. So that makes it exciting. It's on the State Street corridor where we've certainly talked about trying to develop density. And this is part of what the city has tried to do. This will be an energy efficient building. It's going to generate substantial new taxes, even with all of the affordable housing. I think it was $1.3 million of new taxes over the term. This is an exciting thing. So I will be voting in support, and I anticipate voting in support of the 0.5%. John and then Duxon.
A quick question. So our attorney's fees are a third of the IDA fee. If we cut our fees in half, Russ takes a haircut too? Yep. Just want to make sure you're sharing the pain, brother.
Okay, Duxon.
Rich, your comments maybe remind me of a question I had. Is the supportive staffing like a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 thing, or will there be someone on site 24/7 or weekends or additional hours?
I read it as one of the housing units was for an on-site person, but I'd love to hear confirmation of that.
So this is Chris Durr. That is not correct. There will not be somebody there 24/7. There will be somebody there hours that are different than standard 9 to 5. Will include in the evenings and on weekends. And the need will ebb and flow. among the 20 East Shai residents. And so that coordination is something that will take place between Catholic Charities as a service provider and the residents. And so, there may be a need for resident A to meet with somebody at 7 o'clock at night and resident B to meet with somebody on a Saturday morning or during the week. And so, there's going to be that that client service provider relationship to coordinate when those meetings will take place. But there will not be somebody residing in one of the units 24/7, and there will not be somebody at the development. It's only, it's under 60 units, it's 57 units. So that just wouldn't be economically viable. So I hope that answers your question.
Never.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that they might have extended hours to provide services by appointment, but my understanding of some of the problems that could arise is that it's a crisis management situation, and I'm hoping that Catholic Charities or whoever the provider is would have somebody call at least.
And if I can just jump in there, on page 17, there's one TBD non-residential tenant. I read that as an on-site person, but is that the commercial space? Ah, okay, I read that wrong. All right. I thought there was somebody there. Deborah.
I just want to say, despite some hesitancy that we might have about the availability of services and our prior experiences with other somewhat similar projects, I can't think of too many instances in which somebody's come in and created 57 affordable housing units at one shot. And for that reason alone, I would support this. And I will also support the 0.5% reduction in the application fee.
Okay, anybody else ready to send this to public hearing? If so, could I get a motion? John moves and seconds. Discussion on the motion. I'll call the roll. Duxon?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
What was brought up regarding the half percent fee? Will that be included then as part of the materials for the public hearing?
Yeah, what I'll do is I will modify the community benefits memo and just identify that they've requested a 0.5%. That does deviate from our standard policy. So the deviation language will be in the public hearing
Thanks, Heather.
notice. Yeah.
But we'll actually make that decision when we consider the vote on it. Yeah.
I would also love to see us, and I mean, maybe we can address this at a housing committee meeting or something, codify a proposal or a policy on this one way or the other so that it's predictable. I think that this is the sort of thing that, we could just make a part of our policy like we did this abatement program in a future thing. I think we might want to put some parameters around it, around, partnership with nonprofits or, some other something. But I think that it'd be nice to have something that's consistent where everybody knows what to expect rather than having it be a question.
I agree. Yes. Todd?
Yeah, as I say, I'm not a fan of dropping the rates, do like picking and choosing when we do it, for certain part, but I definitely think it should go to the public and be heard and see what we come up with.
Okay. All right. Next item of business is our local labor policy for discussion. And I believe the policy is on page 37 of the packet.
Did we vote?
Oh. I thought I
I
called
think
roll.
someone moved in second.
Oh, right. I was thinking.
We
Voted.
Did we?
We did vote.
Oh, yeah.
Can we do it again? Measure, it doesn't take long.
Vote early enough. Yes.
It's easy to confuse me, Russ. But
Did we vote?
I thought we did, but we just do it again just so that we're certain. You want a double vote on this? Send it to public hearing? Yeah, we did this. We did this. It was unanimous.
Time's taken.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep moving. Local labor policy discussion. And it's on page 37 of your packet. We had some discussion at our last meeting regarding the administrative waiver provision in the local labor policy, and I thought we started to discuss it and we determined we would continue that discussion now. Does anybody wish to speak to this issue? Deborah?
Well, my best recollection, and again, my brain is old, was that we were going to talk about the possibility of sending these notices out by certified mail, just so that there's not an issue anymore about whether somebody got it or didn't. And I don't see that in this.
Yeah, and my understanding, Heather, is that after the meeting, you confirmed that notices had been sent out by email. But we may wish to do it by a more formal process so that there's a paper trail other than electronic is the idea.
Yeah, I've had numerous instances come up in various contexts where people didn't get notice or thought they didn't get notice or something went to spam. I mean, we had a contracting issue with the county that involved email that went to spam and there was a real problem because that potential bidder felt omitted from the process. And I just think email is not the best vehicle for notices that have legal consequences.
Or the only vehicle.
So I'm happy to, in practice, ask applicants within 5 business days of approval that they send via certified mail a description of the project and the anticipated financial assistance as required in the policy. If someone wants to make a motion to modify that language in the policy,
I'll do that.
Deborah moves to a second and seconds. Further discussion? So the proposal would be to both send it by email and follow up with a certified mail?
At least send it by certified mail. If they don't want to send it by email, that's fine. I just,
certified mail.
yeah, I just
Certified
don't
mail,
want to
definitely,
see
yeah.
questions arise and disagreements.
Okay, so notification should include certified mail, if not other methods. Okay. Are we ready to vote? More
Are we just
discussion?
I'm sorry, are we just voting on, if I look at the policy, we're just voting on number 1, notification to, in this case, it's Todd, right?
Yes.
The
Okay.
position, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll call the roll. Duxon?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Good. Anything further on this policy?
Yeah. I do have
Okay,
something.
Todd?
In the policy, like Heather mentioned, we just talked about the financial burdens or like the one letter I get emails all the time from Broome County. IDA sending me stuff all the time because my position with the Tompkins, Cortland County Building Trades. And so I get notice of them all the time telling me about projects and asking, for help finding bidders, and that's, I think what we need to have here, we need to have what they're sending me, they're not sending me financial stuff about the project. They're sending me that they need bidders on these projects. And so then I get the word out to people, hey, how come people aren't bidding these projects? Because the whole point of it is we're trying to, it's not trying to see what we could do financially to help a developer, to see what we could do to put local people working in the community. So I'd like to see if we do something different there with
I'm not sure I understand.
Well,
Isn't this
so-
what's being sent out?
well, the only notification that I didn't get nothing on this note. I went all the way back and when Heather told me those dates, I found a date close to it, like a day away from it, where it was something from Binghamton IDA sending me a notice. I never seen any notice from any contractor developer referencing a job in Tompkins County, none whatsoever.
But
And-
it sounds like you're saying something other than getting it by certified mail. You're saying there should be more notifications?
Well, you should be what it's about, because the only notification, what Heather told us about was just, they were talking about financial stuff and looking at it, it's just telling me that, wow, this developer is getting a lot of money, public money assistance for this project. That's all it's telling me. That's all it's telling anybody. We need them, that doesn't mean that they can't find people to bid these projects that have local labor. That's not telling us that they need specialized talent that's not available in this area, which is what these people claimed in this in this one. There's nothing telling you that. There's nothing, they're just giving you financial numbers and that's it. They should be, if they want to, I mean, the whole intention is to put people working, people here that live here and pay taxes here, not to help the developer. They're going to do the project no matter what. And if we want to really plan on helping put people to work, we're not going to get any permanent jobs out of these projects, usually one or two at the most. You know, so that's why we need to, you know, stay strong on the temporary jobs, the construction jobs. You know.
I have Heather and then John.
So there was a lot of discussion about this at the construction committee. We did look at other policies. I'm familiar with Broome County IDA's policy. It's almost word for word. What ours says is that you need to notify the head of the Building Trades Council of the project. That is your cue as the head of the Building Trades Council to contact all of your people and say, hey, here's a project that received incentives from the IDA and they're going to need bidders. You have the contact information from the company directly. I mean, that's when you get that notification, that's your invitation to contact people and say, hey, you know, I mean, yesterday there was an announcement about a company coming here. Brian Notaboom was my first email this morning. He said, hey, can you put me in touch with them? You know, I mean, that's when you get notice about a project, that's what the trades sort of do. So I think that, you know, based on the discussion at the committee, my memory is that the reason that this notification is in here is so that the Building Trades Council is aware there's a project, whether it be Todd or your predecessor, some, you know, time in the far future, so that they can be notified and get folks contacting them to be on the bid list and to
But it sounds
facilitate
like
that conversation.
Todd is saying Binghamton is doing something very different from what we're doing. And that's what I don't understand is what is Binghamton doing that we're not doing?
Binghamton is sending me the project, is telling me about the project, what are all the details about the project, what's going on. And then I share that with people. I say, hey, we got these projects out. I'm trying to think the last one they did. I just got one recently. Green Mountain Electric Supply is just bought a new building. And I think this was the Binghamton IDA in the Binghamton area. And they just reached out to let people know that, hey, they're coming in town, they're doing this project. They're looking for people to bid their project. You know, they're not coming out with telling me how much money they're applying for this grant, that grant, this tax, and they're just telling us that, hey, we're coming to town, we're doing this project. We need bidders.
So if you wanted to forward something to us or to me to take a look at, I mean, you know, all the IDAs sort of operate differently. But, you know, I mean, I'm happy to contact Stacy and ask her, you know, what she's doing. And bring that to the IDA if there's some way that we can improve the language or improve the requirement here.
Okay.
And I think if we're going to be improving, we need to have documentation in front of us and that email exchange that back and forth about privileged information. There's nothing privileged about that information. It should be.
Let's have that conversation separate from the idea of what kind of notification goes out. We'll get there. Okay, John?
I mean, I think that the salient point here is we're talking about asking for a description of the project and it's like, well, you can say it's a 5-story building that's blue, but that doesn't tell me that you need, you know, steel workers versus wood framers. And I think that the kinds of trades that are going to bid is always an interesting question. My expectation would be that what we're sending to the local workforce is hey, these are the kinds of trades that are going to be involved in this project. And, you know, therefore what we're going to need to make sure, you know, there are local qualified bidders for. I also, you know, the section 2, all we're really asking of them is if they have not actually solicited any bids from any local companies, that they provide us with a written explanation. But that doesn't necessarily say that all, you know, that they must provide the opportunity to bid to more than one local company. So for instance, they could pick a single contractor that happens to be local and send them a bid request when there are a bunch of other contractors that might respond but don't. That's part of why I wanted to see some more information about this, particularly like who was on their bid list. And I think that we might want to work a little bit on that segment as well, You know, in the other programs I'm familiar with that encourage things like WMB participation, you know, there's a New York State list of contractors that are, you know, that are sort of qualified WMBs or SDVOBs. And, you know, you have to, if you've got a trade that you're, you know, if you're looking for an electrician, you have to bid to any electrician that's on that list. You have to send them the bid spec and provide them with adequate time to respond. I think we might want to think about something like that of like, you know, you have to actually present the opportunity to bid to contractors that sort of, you know, are on a list. And I don't know exactly how we maintain that list, but I think we should put a little thought into something like that to make sure that we are actually providing a meaningful opportunity to bid.
Right. Deborah, did you have something?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand what the purpose of today's discussion is. Are we going to be sending back some thoughts to the committee that?
Sounds like it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll look at what Binghamton is sending out. So you get some sense of that and the committee can look at that and try to determine, should we be broadening what the description of the project is? Yeah, Deborah.
Yeah, well, apropos of John's comments, is there a list of local electrical contractors and framing contractors and whatever kind of contractors there are? Is there a list of that somewhere that we could provide to a company that's doing an incentivized project?
Well, I looked at the file that's at the on this issue, and there seemed to be a gigantic list of all the potential bidders.
I think you saw the bid list of who they requested bids from. So some may have been local and some may not have been. At one point, I did reach out to the electrical workers union, to the carpenters and to the plumbers and asked them for a list of local contractors, and all three sent me a list that was, I mean, each of them were several pages long, with contractors from one end of the state to the next. I mean, there were ones in Marathon, New York and Buffalo. And so, you know, when you talk about local workers and local contractors, it's two different things. And if, you know, the union serves an area this wide, their list is still apparently the entire state. So the answer is no, I don't have a list of local subcontractors.
Every one of those contractors employ local people. If they are out of town like that, they come in, they don't like some of these ones that developers are bringing in now, they bring in out of town contractors who bring in an out of town workforce. A union contractor is going to have union workforce, local workforce. It's not going to be.
I'm not saying that they bring local or they don't bring local, but when
They have local
I'm
workforce.
answering Deborah's question, do we have a list of
Yeah.
local subcontractors? I was unable to get one.
Oh, I'll get, I'll have one
All
tomorrow.
right, I think Deborah's point is a good one, that
If
we should send this to the committee.
provide a list to the companies whose projects we incentivize and say, these are the local contractors. I think that would go a long way towards incentivizing them to reach out to those local contractors. I mean, I think that one of the things we ought to do if we're really concerned about this is make it as easy as possible for both the contractors and the incentivized company to get together.
So I could get a list from a union hall, but what about non-union?
Yeah, they're fine too. As long as they're
I don't know
local
where
people.
those lists would.
Yeah,
Well, maybe
we have a good idea of all the time. It's in town.
since Todd represents a lot of these contractors, maybe he could be of assistance in creating a list.
Yeah, I got a good list of the local people too that aren't union. And that I'd love to see them working on it instead of people from out of town.
Okay, Ann?
So it sounds like there's a willingness to bring this back to the Labor Committee, and so why don't we work on that? And so just to clarify, what I'm hearing is it would be, I think we want a list of contractors that employ local laborers, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a local contractor, but the laborers are local. Is that? But we'll be looking at that at the committee of what's the best way to help get that
Yes,
information.
let's send that to committee and not,
Yeah, we don't.
not have the
like, manage
discussion
that
here. Okay. John and Jeff, I'd like to move on to the question of IDA members reviewing the underlying documentation, but anything further on this issue? John, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I just think like it should be the case that if a contractor expresses an interest in bidding and they are local, that they should be required to have the opportunity to bid. And I think that it can basically be that simple, right? It's like if these projects exist and we know that they exist, and a contractor reaches out and said, I want to be on that bid list, we can make sure that they were at the end before we provide a waiver, right? So I don't think it necessarily, like, you could have a new contractor, or somebody who wasn't yet on the list at the beginning of the bidding process.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I'm just thinking we got 1 minute
Yeah.
left to the meeting.
Yes.
But yeah, we can look at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't really know, and maybe I should know, where the bid documents are sent. Or do the contractors send them to the Trades Council? Do they publish them somewhere where people go and find them? Like, I don't really know.
You're talking about when the bid specs go out?
What the bid
Yeah.
process actually looks like.
Right. Yeah, I mean, typically like the GC will send out documentation of what's actually getting done to
To whom?
prospective bidders.
And that's it. They don't post it, like there isn't a central database somewhere for RFPs or.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
There are a number of like trade publications that will reach out and ask you for documentation that they can distribute to people that subscribe to it, which is another way to get bids. But for the most part, you just send your specs to the
Let's
contract.
send that to committee.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Or Jeff, did you have something on this?
Actually, I was just going to comment on your next,
Okay.
moving on to.
And I just refer back, I sent an email to everybody because there'd been a request to share all the underlying documents electronically. And my view was, I can't change a policy as the chair that this had to come to everybody, but I proposed in the meantime that if somebody wanted to see the underlying documents, they could go to the IAED office and see them. I did that yesterday. I looked through it. I think that's a good way to do it so that we do not have the underlying documents floating around electronically. There are bits of information in there that I think a developer would not want to have in the public. There are some proprietary bits of information. And I certainly would never want any accusation that any document that became public that shouldn't have came from the IDA. So it seems like a reasonable imposition on us to just say, go to the office and see it, and you can. But I'd invite discussion on that point. John, Jeff, Deborah, Todd.
Yes, I actually, I mean, I don't know, like, I think we all live pretty busy lives and have to, like, I'm reviewing the agenda packets in the middle of the night. I don't know what your life is like, but mine doesn't contain a lot of time to go to the office during business hours and look through the documents. And also, I mean, it's like, am I going to be allowed to take a notebook and like write things down? Like, what's our expectation of secrecy around this kind of stuff? I will also often re-review past documents that I've received when I'm looking at like bigger picture trends. I just, referred to, last month's agenda, or, in this meeting to answer a question. I think that having us have ready access to historical information about what has happened is pretty important for us to be able to carry out our fiduciary responsibility to this board. I also think that we need to be really careful about what expectations we set of secrecy of documents that are provided to us. I think there are certainly things like personal financial information of the developers or other things like that our staff might have access to that certainly should be secret. But I can't see how the list of who they asked for bids from should be considered secret, which was a question that was asked and not answered. I can't see how the list of who responded should be secret. Maybe we need to redact some things. But I think that we should be able to have an expectation that we will be provided with low friction access to the information that's necessary for us to understand how the IDA is functioning and if it's actually doing the things that it's supposed to be doing. Not so that we can second guess an individual waiver, which I would not support questioning this waiver at all, but so that we can consider the big picture implications of how these policies are written and if they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And I think that that's a very important point.
Okay, Jeff, your view?
Yeah, so I would be of the opinion, obviously, we're sending it back to the labor policy or the labor committee to look at this. And as part of that function, I'm comfortable with the labor committee having access to basically, I would say our first go around. So they can then review this policy, see if it makes sense or see if they need to make some changes. I would not be in favor of allowing the entire IDA board access to these documents. I just don't think we're a policy board. I feel like if we have issues, then it goes back to the committee and they should have access to the documents at that point. But I don't see a need for us at the IDA level to have that. We should be at the policy level and we put policy in place. Then we have an administrative staff that implements that policy. If there's something that goes wrong, then we ship it back to a committee and we figure out what documents they need to see and give them access to that in that type of setting.
Okay, Deborah?
I think it depends on what kind of information we're wanting to look at. If it's just a question of who was given an opportunity to bid, there's nothing proprietary about that information. And I don't have a problem with that list being distributed. If there's anything that's proprietary, however, I don't think it should be shared via email. It's so easy to print a document off so that you can read it better. I mean, I'm of the age where I can't read anything very involved on my computer, so I print stuff out. It's easy to throw that in the garbage. I just don't want to create a situation where proprietary information can get out into the general public. And I think at this stage, this is a discussion that should go back to the labor committee because as the labor policy is currently written, the labor policy that controls the waiver process, there's no reason for us to be looking at that list because as John pointed out, there's no requirement stated that a local companies should be required to bid. So I think this is kind of all of a piece.
Okay, I mean, isn't that exactly why we would want to look at that list to see if this is a problem or not?
Well, but if you want to have a policy that has more teeth in it, in that it requires a company to solicit local bids, then compliance and the validity of a waiver suggests that you have to look and see if that policy was met. But right now, we don't have that policy. So, what are you going to accomplish by looking at a list of who bid? It doesn't matter because there's no requirement that local companies be invited to bid.
I mean, you don't want to know if we have a problem or not, right? I mean,
Well,
my
I
question is,
suspect
do we
we
have a
may
problem?
well have a problem, but until we have a requirement that's addressed to solving that problem, there's nothing for us to monitor. That's my point.
So
Yeah.
I just want to point out that number 2 in the policy requires proof of local bids. So they provide to us a bid list.
Where's that bid list?
I have the bid list right here.
So, I mean, we should,
Pages long.
we should be able to get that. This, the stuff we got for the meeting agenda package, there's more privileged information there than a list of who bid the
So
job.
it does require that
That's
a bid
it.
list be submitted, that they, make every effort to include local bidders. No, we don't have a list of local companies. Would that be helpful? Yes, it would. Absolutely. So there is that expectation there that they do solicit bids from local subcontractors. And the policy,
It's
I think it
implicit,
says
yeah.
that.
It's implicit. They have to provide a bid list. And if there are types of work for which no bid was solicited, then they have to explain why. I guess.
Who was sent the bid list? That's not really proprietary, but the actual bid numbers, like how a contractor put together their numbers, that I don't think we should be having floating around in public.
But that isn't
That's
what we
absolutely
asked
fine.
for, and it's also
But
like, we
but
were
it's all,
denied
but it's all,
bid list.
no, I think it was delayed. It wasn't denied. And that's,
We were told we couldn't have it by email. The only thing we were getting by email was the number.
yeah, and it's all combined. It's all in the file. So I was saying, go look at it.
Can we take this
Yeah.
to committee because?
Yeah.
That'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
And because, and we're over, I'm
Yes.
always late for a meeting because that starts at 4 because we go overtime just
Yeah.
to.
Yeah,
You know,
hour and a half
but
really
we-
isn't enough
We're
for the
working
business
on
we have.
this in committee.
Okay, so enough discussion on this. We'll move it on. Okay. Um,
Leave the minutes.
yeah, I was just going to say, I don't have a chair's report. Is there a staff report? Anything you want to tell us, Heather?
I just wanted to report that before the legislative session ended, that legislation was approved. We expect the governor is going to sign it that allows the pilots to be included in the tax cap calculation for taxing jurisdictions. It's been since 2016 that they are not included in that tax cap calculation. And it's been a priority of the New York State Economic Development Council and some other entities to get that put back into the tax cap, and it is now. So it's a benefit to the taxing jurisdictions. I just wanted to make you aware of that passed. And that's it for my staff report.
Can I ask a clarifying question about that? Does that mean that they would now be able to raise taxes more on unassisted properties because you decrease how much the pilot counts in the calculations of cap?
No,
You increase.
you increase it.
You add the pilot back into the base amount on which you calculate the percentage of the tax cap increase. I think.
Yes,
So you treat it as if the
Right.
property was fully taxable when you're calculating the cap,
you calculate it based on the pilot asset value.
which means that you can raise the taxes on all the other parcels by more without exceeding the cap.
No,
But
so your tax cap, you look at all of the assessed values of the properties. And IDAs, if they've delivered a pilot, the assessed value of that property is not part of the tax cap. So when you take a project off onto a pilot, then it drops off of the assessed value. It was a
I got it.
problem with the original legislation,
okay.
and we've been
Cool,
trying to
cool,
get
cool,
that
cool.
fixed.
Yep.
Fixed. They also changed the tax cap calculation. Now you can include affordable housing projects that are getting 581A assessments.
Okay. Minutes, June 14th, 2023, Deborah moves, Jeff seconds. I'll take a hand vote on that. All in favor? Those are approved. Next item, we are out of time. I know there had been some question about executive session.
we can do it another day.
Okay.
Maybe we want to schedule,
Yeah, I'm
perhaps,
thinking,
could I propose that we adjust our schedule?
I think maybe we should start at 2 because hour and a half does not seem enough
Yeah.
for what we have on our plate.
Better to end early than to always run over.
I like 2:00. Sounds good.
2:00? All right.
Wait, so we just added 30 minutes. I mean, we've been regularly going till like 5 PM.
We're a chatty bunch.
I mean, we got a lot of business.
Yeah.
Do we want to consider adding more time, which,
Well, I would suggest we try to. Is that agreeable to everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Do we need like a resolution for that or just do it? You're the chair. You can just do it, right?
I will just check with the county to make sure that the room is available. And if it is, I can go. ahead and do
Katrina
that.
says it is.
There. See, I didn't even have to turn around.
Efficient government.
Work really fast.
Okay, I think that would help us. So that's a good idea. All right. Any further business to come before the IDA? A motion to adjourn? Deborah moves, Todd seconds, all in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.